We're all very familiar with Mercedes-Benz cars and Mercedes-Benz trucks and vans driving around our roads these days. But who remembers the Mercedes-Benz tractor, the famous MB-TRAC that was produced during the 1970s and into the 80s? Good evening, everybody. You're very welcome back to the Gaggenau Farm Machinery YouTube channel. Tonight's video, we're just doing a quick overview on the famous MB-TRAC that was produced by Mercedes-Benz from 1972 until 1991. So the MB-TRAC was produced at the Gaggenau plant in Baden-Württemberg in Germany from 1972, 73 went into full production up until 1991. Now this is the same factory, the same plant that the Unimog was made in. And the roots of the MB-TRAC come from the actual Unimog itself. The Unimog had been in development since, or not in development, but in production since 1951. It's been in development since the end of the Second World War. So the Gaggenau plant holds the title of the oldest and I think the longest running automobile manufacturing plant in the world. So it's been open since 1894, producing cars for Daimler-Benz. Well, not cars, but trucks, whatever, everything during the war. Especially during World War I and World War II. So during World War II, it would have been making trucks like commercial vehicles for the war, for the Nazis, I suppose, utility vehicles and the like. And then when the war ended, they had all the equipment there, they had everything was there, the factory was still there, hadn't been bombed, it was still in working order. So when Germany got itself back on its feet, got back to some sort of normality, they went into production of trucks and especially the Unimog, this light commercial vehicle that everybody probably knows at this stage. So the Unimog, yeah, it was built there and started in 1951, but into the 1960s, customers, especially farmers, had been looking for something a little bit more robust, something that'll go off field, something that could pull an implement, pull a trailer, that you could maybe mount something on the back of, that you could do tillage work with, crop work. And the MB-TRAC went into development in the late 60s. Now during the development phase, it was known as, every development vehicle of the MB-TRAC was known as the AM60. Now the 60, as far as I know, stands for the horsepower. The AM, I'm sure, is probably German of some description. So yeah, in 1972, the first of the MB-TRACs was launched, the famous MB-TRAC 6570. Now, if you've seen this tractor today, you wouldn't recognize it, I suppose, as one of the MB-TRAC family, because it is like a sort of a pebble grey or a pebbly kind of white with red wheels. It doesn't stand out as being an MB-TRAC, but it was the first one launched, and it fell into the category of the light version. So they had three versions, and they had the light, they had the medium, and they had the heavy. These were broken down into four classes then, or four sort of subclasses. The light was the designation 440, the medium was the 441, and then the two heavy categories were the 442 and the 443. So the 440 then started out at the 6570 right up to the MB-TRAC 900 turbo, which was 90 horsepower turbocharged. And in between that then you had the 700 and you had the 800, and some of them were turbo, some of them were not. Some of them had a 3.8 litre engine, some of them had a 4 litre engine. So that was they were all 4 cylinders. It was the light version of it, lighter axles, lighter hydraulics, stuff like that, the smaller scale of things. I do remember in the early 90s, we did have an MB-TRAC. I think it was a 900 turbo. It was definitely a turbo, but I'm pretty sure it was a 900 turbo that we had gotten for a couple of seasons, and we were using it for spraying. So it had come over from the UK with a Hardy D-mount sprayer on the back of it, and all it done was the spraying. And I never worked it, but I did drive it. So I used to drive it from field to field, probably within a 20-kilometer radius, all the different fields. My dad then used to bring the water tank, the big heavy water tank or whatever. He used to drive that, and I would drive the MB-TRAC in between different fields. I was probably about 15 or 16 at the time, but I do remember it was completely different than anything I'd ever driven It was well capable of doing well over 40 kilometers an hour, probably nearly 50 kilometers an hour at that stage. Had sprung front axle, obviously, a very comfortable machine to drive, a little bit bouncy on the front, but you could fly over bumps with it, you wouldn't feel it. Whereas when you think of tractors that were being produced back then, again, your 50 series John Deere's and your 399s, your Masseys and stuff like that, they were quite uncomfortable. None of them had axle suspension, none of them had cab suspension, with the exception being, of course, the fast track. So the fast track and the MB-TRAC, they fall into the same category. So is what's called the track category, so the TRAC track category. So that would be a tractor, agricultural tractor with the wheels all the same size, a centre mounted cab, an engine in a low slung front chassis with the front axle incorporated. And being able to carry implements before, on top of, or behind the rear axle. So when you look at the MB-TRAC, you have a big shelf space on the back of it for mounting implements on top of, whether it was a fertilizer spreader or it was a sprayer or something. It was a great utility tractor, very good all-rounder, and it was actually very good with a loader as well. They were very popular with loaders. So that's that track type machine. So yeah, the 440 was the light version, and then into the 441. The 441 models was the medium models, slightly bigger axles, bigger wheels, much bigger tractor, stronger hydraulics, things like that. And that was the 1000 and the 1100. So the MB-TRAC 1000, the MB-TRAC 1100, and there was two variations, I think, of the 1100 engine. One was like 5 horsepower stronger than the other, something like that. So that slot into the middle, and then when you went up into the 442 category, then you were into your bigger machines. It started off at the 1100 again. These were all 6 cylinders as far as I remember. 442 version 6-cylinder, and then it went right up to your 1800 intercooler, which was part of the 443 reverse drive family. So the 1800 intercooler. So in between that, then you had your 1300, you had your 1500, your 1600 turbo, and then your 1800 was pretty much a 1600 turbo with an intercooler put onto it. So the intercooler, what did the intercooler do? So the intercooler was there to cool down the air after the turbo. So when you spool up air in the turbo, it heats it up, it gets very hot. So when air is hot, it expands. So when you're trying to get air into a combustion chamber, if it's hot, you get less air molecules into it. So if you cool it down, it becomes denser. So you turbocharge it, you run it through the intercooler, you cool it down, and then you get more air into the combustion chamber for stronger combustion and more horsepower. So that took the 1800, the 1600 up to 180 horsepower. So it was designated the 1800 intercooler. And it had then, you had the reverse drive system built into that. So that was very popular with people that were doing foraging work. I suppose you could mount a silage harvester onto the back of it and you could drive it in reverse. You could put a mower onto it, a maize chopper. There was a lot of implements that was designed and developed to go in the back, to drive in reverse, but facing forward. And steering wheel, the whole lot, you had everything there for you, all your controls. A very easy machine to drive. I don't know who else was doing it at the time. Probably Fendt were doing it with their reverse drive in a lot of their machines. But with this spec of a tractor and this configuration, I'd say it probably wasn't as nose heavy maybe as the Fendt was. It would have been a lot more stable. It would have been a better machine to drive in reverse. So that completed the lineup. So just looking at the history then throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s. So the history. So in 1987 then, I suppose there was a shift in the MB-TRAC world when it went into a strategic partnership with Deutz. Deutz at the time were in manufacturing their own Deutz MB-TRAC, which was a very similar machine. So they joined together and they had a new family that was designated the TTE, so the Track Technik and Weltschleigenschaft family, something like that. And that TTE moniker still lives on today, your TTE, your TTV and stuff like that. So that was from 87 onwards up until the early 1990s. So in 1991, 1992, I think MB knew that the writing was on the wall for the MB-TRAC. There was financial problems and difficulties, and it just wasn't, I suppose, within their forecast for the future. So the MB-TRAC family was sold to Werner Forschtechnik. So they would have specialised in making forestry equipment, and the MB-TRAC became the WF-TRAC. So that WF-TRAC is still, as far as I'm aware, in production today. So they make forestry equipment, specialise in logging equipment, anything for forestry, 6x6s and stuff like that. So yeah, just the technical specifications, was looking at the technical specifications of the MB-TRAC. As I said, it was a track type tractor, all four wheels the same size, centre mounted cab, and which was abnormal at the time was the sprung front suspension, to make it more comfortable on the roads and at higher speeds, improve road handling as well. Wheel steering, so it wasn't a pivot steer, and you could carry an implement on top, on behind the rear axle or in front of the rear axle, just behind the cab, and it could be driven in reverse as well. And despite having, a strong drivetrain resemblance to the Unimog, it wasn't a redesigned Unimog. It was a completely new chassis. Axles, drivetrain was the only thing pretty much that was similar. So the engine and the gearbox end of things is what remained similar to the Unimog. So just as regards the transmission then, so you had a 16 forward, 8 reverse. You had a H-shift lever with a splitter device, and then you had a separate gear lever for forward and reverse with a high-speed forward range built into that. The medium model was technically very similar to the light model, just with some stronger upgrades on it. And the heavy-duty models then had stronger engines, 6-cylinder engines, turbocharged, intercooled, and then you had your reverse drive, reverse cab functions on it. So that was pretty much it. The Unimog was produced from 1951 up until 2001, I think, 50 years in that same Gaggenau plant. And then production of the Unimog had moved to Worth in Germany into Mercedes-Benz older plant. And that plant in Gaggenau now, to this day, it's the centre of excellence, the centre of competence, or something to call it, for Mercedes-Benz drivetrains for trucks. So the likes of your automatic trucks, your automatic transmissions and manual transmissions for your Actros and stuff like that are all developed and designed and developed in that plant where the MB-TRAC was made. So there's a lot of history in that plant since 1894. So that is pretty much it for the MB-TRAC. There's not a whole lot more. Just something that I wanted to talk about. I do work for Mercedes-Benz myself, as some of you might know. I am a Mercedes-Benz technician, but I've never physically worked on an MB-TRAC. That's it for today. If you have an MB-TRAC, if you know someone that has one, if you remember them, if you drove one in the 80s or 90s, I'm not sure about how many of them were exported to other continents, to America, to Canada, to Australia, to New Zealand, to Africa. Now, I do know that there's people on watching this from all over the world. I've had messages from every country in the world, from America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. So if there are any MB-TRACs, maybe a couple of individual ones were shipped over. But I know at the time, anyone that was selling Unimog, the Unimog dealers were also the MB-TRAC dealers. So I'm not sure how many of them are around the world. I'd say the vast majority of the 41,000 that were made were kept on the European continent, Germany and the like, and the UK. And there are quite a few in Ireland. I don't think they're ever sold new in Ireland, but there are quite a few of them in Ireland. I know there's one man down in Cork I've seen on YouTube with a reverse drive one that he doing silage with. I think he had another 1600 or 1500 or something drawn along beside him. So if you have one, I'd love to see one. I'd love to go down and visit. I'd love to have a chat to you about it. I'd love to take a video of it. or indeed if you've any other tractor that you think might interest me, something rare. Now, I don't want somebody saying I have a 7810 or I have a 6910, like they're 10 a penny across Ireland. I want if you have something rare, something that you've restored, it could be from the 1930s or 40s, it doesn't matter when, anything that you think that you'd like to show off that people might want to see, I'd love to see it and have a chat with you about it and take a few videos and pictures and talk about the history of different machines. It doesn't have to be a tractor, it can be a combine, it can be anything, it can be a Massey 30 seed drill, I don't mind. Anything at all, if it's farm machinery related that people might have an interest in, because there's a huge amount of interest on the internet for this kind of stuff. So that was it. That was it for the MB-TRAC. Yeah, 1991, I suppose it was a good time then. JCB just came in with the fast track. They just hit the ground running then when the MB-TRAC was finishing up. I'd say there was a little bit of strategic development going on there. They just hit it at the right time. They knew the market was going to be open up for that particular style of tractor, because the fast track is the same. The track is the same type as the MB-TRAC, and of course the fast track went on to be one of the most successful tractors around the world. It's fantastic. New tractors coming out regularly, and they're probably a machine that I will do a video on sometime in the future as well. So yeah, that's it. I'll be back at the weekend. I will have a video on everything that's happening over at Agri Technique in Hanover. I'll be looking at all the winners and all the big launches over in Hanover. For anyone that's interested, you can tune in. It'll probably be out, please God, bright and early on Sunday morning, sometime around 10 or 11 o'clock. So until then, everyone, thanks a million for watching, and I'll see you all soon.